Well, hello and welcome back. We are finally getting to the end of our database sync. And basically, I was walking through a lot of troubleshooting the last couple episodes. Really came down to one or two changes that I wanted to talk through to sort of get us over the hump, as it were. So the first thing that we were running into, if I can find the referential. Here we go, referential load. So if you remember, or you can look back to the prior couple of episodes, one of the things we're doing is we're going through and we first pull all the data for the tables that don't have any references. So we just know, and those are based on our number of rows. Either if it's set to 0, it's just going to pull everything. Otherwise, it'll be, if we set it to 100, it's only going to pull 100 rows out of that table. Now, when we go to tables that have references to other tables, it's not that clean. And so what we're doing is we're saying, let's get all the data for the tables we know, the ones where we have X number of rows. Let's get that stuff pulled over. And then we're going to go through and we're going to, where we don't have a table loaded, if something references it, then we're going to build the data based on the primary keys within that table. Now, the trick about that is we can have a table reference actually 3 or 4 other tables. So we were building this thing that was called imported tables. And what we weren't doing was checking it quite enough. So we were running into a couple of situations where 2 tables would reference the same table. And when the first one came through, it was awesome. When the second one came through, it wasn't first checking whether that table had been imported, and it was causing some issues because technically we would have gotten, and we got all of the correct rows the first time through. Because what we do is we would build, if you remember, we would build that query based on all of the tables that were referenced. And then that's how we pull the data in. So it was easy for us to, have some extra slip through. So the simplest thing to do that is I just say, hey, since we use referential load to load it, first thing I did, I said, hey, if the table that we're going to load is already in imported tables, then we just kick imported tables back out. We're done. We don't do anything because we're done. So that allows us to not double enter a table because we were getting it loaded properly. We're getting it populated. For example, somewhere down here, we're going to see where, we're appending and we're good. So we are saying, hey, this thing got built one way or another. Or here, we can just do a straight load of the table data, and we're making sure that we get that table in there. If we get it into imported tables twice, we really don't care if it's in that array twice. What we don't want to do is if it's there once, we don't want to check it. We don't want to try to load again. So putting this check up here should, and did, in all the cases I was running through, did fix that. Now, another thing that I was running into, which is really a change in how it's to address something that should not happen. One of the things I ran into that we talked about, that got me wondering about how we were doing enumerated types back several episodes. One of the things we were running into is that enumerated types weren't coming across properly. We're getting things where it was telling us there's basically a size constraint for a value that we're putting into an enumerated row. So an enumerated values could be things, so like we could do like enum, and let's say it's, and it's not going to look exactly like that, but let's say we had an enum that was like grape, apple, orange. And so that would mean that in that column, we should see grape, apple, or orange. But I've run into some situations where there would be, for example, an empty string. Or we had some sort of an enum where, like, let's say we had some large, let's say some long name. And then later we came back and said, no, we don't want that. What we really want is just these three. Well, the problem is that it's not necessarily going to go back and fix that. So you may still have, even though you change the enum, when you change the enumerated type, it is not necessarily going to it's not going to cause a trigger or something that's going to break the data and say, hey, you have to remove the fields that have that value. So there are ways to get invalid enum values into data, and that was causing some issues. And so the easiest way to fix that is to cheat. And so that's where we go back and use our, where is it? I'll find one here. We use our try and except. So basically what we're going to do there is say, hey, I'm going to try to execute this, but I'm not going to bother if it doesn't. I also ran into this in a couple of, there's some odd combinations of table SQL that was getting pulled across. I couldn't figure out how they built it in the first place because it was technically illegal. Like if I just take the pure SQL, it does not like it. So in those cases, what I do is I just say, hey, if I can't generate it, if I get an exception trying to execute it, instead of bailing out on the script entirely, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print whatever it was I was trying to run, and then I'm just going to continue on. So what I would end up getting somewhere back here maybe is stuff like, let's see if I can find one down here. I think I got them all clean, so it's probably not going to show up anymore. But I would get, yeah, unfortunately I didn't steal that. Oh, here's one. So I think it didn't like this for some reason. And it just kicked this out. I'm not sure why it did, but so for example, it didn't run this one. So whatever the enum was, like here, they had this, and I believe this is source and this is destination. So destination had this thing that didn't value, that was some weird value that we had in there. And it said, hey, I'm not going to allow that. So when we tried to alter it, for some reason it didn't do it. Maybe the trigger actually kicked in this case, or it could have been the null wouldn't have been a problem. But for some reason it didn't like it. So if I wanted, I can see that on my output, and I can go in and try to manually fix that if I need to. It depends. Sometimes that's going to be an issue. Sometimes it's not. But it does allow us to, for the most part, then push everything across, and then we can always go back and do the fixes. And that allows us now to do it based on max number of rows, as opposed to just having to do everything and sort of slam it home by shutting off triggers and constraints. And in so doing, we now have a script that will run through, and we can do whatever we need to with it, as far as tables or triggers or store procedures or functions. And let's see, so we don't really need these notes anymore. And so what we have is we've got our little feature flag thing. So if we come in, we can pick whichever values we want to do, which is tables, columns, indexes, rows, row data, synchronized procedures. We've got a couple we missed. I think we missed. So we need that -F for our functions. So we'll do that. Let's see. So T, C, D, I, P, R, rows, F, functions, and TR would be whatever TR was. What was TR? TR is, triggers. So let's just do this. Now we have our documentation of sorts. And then it's going to go in and do these, and it does them in a bit of an order. We do have a logical order to it. And then it's going to come through for each of the, or actually it goes down here. We're going to come through here And depending on what we have, we're going to do these for each of our list of databases within our settings.py file. We went ahead and pulled that in. So we pulled our source, our target, our databases. So we've got a database list, which is here. And it's just going to be a list of names. And so you do need that database to exist. So you can't just, say I've got a dev database. You can't just push that when it's not there. You're going to have to actually do, create database dev. So it does assume that much. It assumes at least that you've gone in and created your database. But once you've got it, it's going to fly through and you can, play around with it. I would definitely not create a database, somewhere that you are worried about it right now. Put it on a local maybe initially and use it to see if the data is coming across properly. Connect to it. Maybe if you've got unit tests or something to run against it, that will help. And once you've done that, then you've got, this thing, you can plug it into however you want to. All of these functions are pretty moderately straightforward. Like I said, we've got the tries that we've added now, so it's a little more likely to go through. It's not going to just bail out like it did before. I have adjusted a little bit some of the output that is here, so you're not going to see quite as much. Basically just because it was a lot to see. You can see we've got a lot of like debug related stuff that is still in there. But after all of that debugging and walking through and coding and things like that, it turned out that it was actually a little bit of an invalid database I was pulling across. And that was what was really biting me, is that I had something in a state that it should not have gotten to. And it's basically the referential integrity was not exactly where it was supposed to be. But if you do this, you should be able to get it, as long as you make sure that you should be able to keep your referential integrity. But that's, again, make sure that you're doing things like grabbing your indexes, your triggers, and pull those things across, and you should be in good shape. If you want like a development version, a very quick and clean database, is you can probably get away with if you just do tables, columns, and indexes. It depends on whether or not, if you've got functions or procedures. So you could come in and do, like if you wanted to do tables, so do like a -c, columns, indexes, -i, then you could build out a sort of like a clean or empty development database pretty quick. If you needed to do your procedures and your functions, add your -p and your -f, and then you're in pretty good shape at that point. So what we've got is something that allows you to get in there quick, make a database. Now we actually allow you to push data into it, so it's not just a shell. And you've got a pretty good example of a lot of Python to work with here as well. Not to mention, we got pretty deep into the world of, I can go back over here. We got pretty deep into especially the information schema in MySQL. So there's a lot of stuff here. If you're ever curious about how to find tables or indexes or columns or values or all that kind of stuff, that's the metadata, this will give you a really good start. You can jump into any one of the functions, and like say function itself, missing functions. I'm going to be able to see right here that this is roughly how I can get a list of functions. Obviously, there's some things in here like we've got our schemas already defined. You may get more than you wanted, but you do a select star and you can start working your way through it and get down to the specific query that you need for your information. This has been updated in version control. So if you check the links, you'll be able to get the latest. You can play around with it. You will have to set up your settings file. You can see where we did that, what it looked like initially, and how we just moved stuff over. You'll also be able to see it if you look up here when it does a connect somewhere in here. Oh, maybe not. Let's see. Oh, so I go right in because I give it the config. And if I go to here, I think I've already so I'm just pulling it straight in because I've already set up most of the config. So you can see that in examples. You can also see that, you can either see it on the code or take a look back at a couple of tutorials. Early on, we set that up so you can see what needs to be done to configure your source and your target database. Make sure you do not confuse the two, because that can cause you all sorts of not fun things to happen. That being said, we can finally wrap this one up. So we will continue throwing out various tutorials and stuff like that. I think this gives us hopefully you've had a really good sort of crash course into SQL, particularly MySQL and Python, using those, building some scripts and finding a useful little application maybe that you can build. And now you have something that you can build on top of this and see where your skills take you. That being said, we'll let you get back to it. So go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time.